For 50 years, she was the family's housekeeper. When they tried to evict her, a hidden letter changed everything. Helen woke up long before dawn, the first light of day barely peeking through the curtains of the McAllister household. The familiar creaks of the old wooden floors greeted her as she swung her legs off the side of the bed, her body yearning for the warmth of the covers she had just left behind. She stretched, feeling the twinge of age in her joints, but there was a certain comfort in the routine that had anchored her life for the past 50 years. As she shuffled into the kitchen, the sweet scent of coffee began to fill the air. Helen had always believed that the aroma of brewing coffee was like a gentle embrace, warming the heart and soul. She carefully measured the grounds, recalling the countless mornings spent preparing breakfast for Margaret McAllister, the matriarch who had taken her in as a young woman. Memories flooded her mind. Margaret's laughter echoing through the halls, her encouraging words that had pushed Helen to become a better version of herself. "Just a little more, Helen. You can do it," Margaret would say, her voice filled with unwavering belief. It was a mantra Helen had carried with her through the years. A reminder that she was more than just an employee, she was part of the fabric of McAllister family. As the coffee brewed, Helen moved to the pantry to gather ingredients for breakfast. She decided on pancakes, a dish that had always brought smiles to the family's faces. She pulled out the flour, sugar, and eggs, her hands moving effortlessly through the motions. Yet, underneath the surface of this comforting routine, a knot of anxiety twisted in her stomach. The recent passing of Margaret had cast a shadow over the household, and the dynamics within the family were shifting in ways that made Helen uneasy. Just as she poured the batter onto the hot griddle, she heard the familiar sound of footsteps. Andrew, the eldest McAllister sibling, stumbled into the kitchen, his hair tousled and eyes still heavy with sleep. "Morning, Helen," he mumbled, running a hand through his hair. He leaned against the counter, his expression a mix of exhaustion and frustration. "Good morning, Andrew. Coffee's almost ready, and breakfast will be on in a minute," Helen replied, her voice steady despite the unease in her heart. "Thanks," he said, his brow furrowing as he glanced around the kitchen. "I don't know how we're going to sort all of this out. It feels like everything is just falling apart." The weight of his words hung in the air, and Helen's heart sank. She had overheard the arguments between him and Claire, the younger sibling who had always been more spirited and determined. The house, a place filled with laughter, warmth, and cherished memories, was now a battleground for their differing visions of the future. "Your mother would want you two to work together, you know?" Helen said gently, trying to provide some perspective. She loved this home and everything it stood for. Andrew sighed, rubbing his temples. "Yeah, well, Claire doesn't see it that way. She thinks we should sell it and move on. To her, it's just a piece of property." Helen felt a pang of sadness at the thought of the house being sold. It was more than just walls and a roof. It held the essence of Margaret's love and dedication. "Have you talked to her about how you feel?" she asked, trying to guide him toward a more constructive conversation. "Talk? We can barely stand to be in the same room without arguing," Andrew replied, frustration spilling over. "It's like we're both so stubborn, and I don't even know what she wants. All I know is that I don't want to lose this place, not after everything." Just then, Claire burst into the kitchen, her presence filling the space with a whirlwind of energy. "What's going on in here? I heard voices, and I thought maybe someone was plotting against me," she said with a teasing smile, but her eyes held a flicker of tension. "Just discussing the future of the house," Andrew replied, crossing his arms defensively. "Oh, you mean your plan to keep it as a shrine to Mom while the rest of us move on with our lives?" Claire shot back, her voice rising. "This isn't a museum, Andrew. It's just a house." Helen felt her heart race at the brewing conflict. She had been a witness to the love and care that Margaret had poured into their home, and she couldn't bear to see it turned into a source of contention. "Maybe you both need to take a step back," she interjected, trying to mediate. "Your mother would want you to remember the happy times you had here, not fight over it." Claire rolled her eyes, dismissing Helen's words. "What do you know, Helen? You're just the help. You don't understand what it's like to be family," she retorted, her tone sharper than intended. Helen flinched at the sting of those words. For years she had dedicated herself to the McAllisters, pouring her heart into their lives. She had celebrated their joys and comforted them in their sorrows. The idea that she was just a mere employee felt like a knife twisting in her chest. "Claire, that's unfair," Andrew said, stepping in to defend Helen. "She's been here longer than either of us can remember. She was practically a second mother to us." "Yeah, well, that doesn't make her part of the family," Claire shot back, her voice rising again. "Maybe if she hadn't been so busy catering to Mom, we wouldn't be in this mess." A heavy silence fell over the kitchen, the air thick with tension. Helen's heart raced as she caught the glimmer of frustration and anger in both siblings' eyes. She felt a wave of despair wash over her. What had once been a loving home was now a battlefield. She turned away, her hands trembling as she flipped the pancakes, unwilling to let them see how deeply their words had cut her. "I think I'll go upstairs for a bit," she said quietly, trying to escape the suffocating atmosphere. As she walked away, she could feel their eyes on her, and she fought back the tears that threatened to spill. Once in the solitude of the attic, Helen took a moment to collect herself. The space was dimly lit, filled with boxes and memories from years gone by. She had always found refuge in this quiet corner of the house, surrounded by the remnants of the past. It was a place where she could retreat and remember the love that had once filled these walls. As she rummaged through the boxes, Helen felt a sense of urgency to find something, anything, that could help her make sense of the situation. She needed to remind Andrew and Claire of the family they had been, of the love that had brought them together. It was then that her fingers brushed against a familiar box, one that she hadn't opened in years. With a deep breath, she pulled it into the light. The box was filled with photographs, letters, and trinkets, each item a testament to a life well lived. As she sifted through the contents, memories flooded back. Birthdays celebrated, holidays spent together, laughter ringing through the air like music. Then, beneath a pile of old letters, she found something that made her heart skip a beat. A letter from Margaret. Her hands shook as she carefully unfolded the fragile paper, the familiar handwriting bringing back a rush of emotions. "Dear Helen," it began, and Helen's eyes filled with tears as she read the words that had once comforted her so many times. Margaret's voice echoed in her mind, and she could almost hear her laugh, the warmth of her spirit enveloping her like a blanket. "I want you to know how much you mean to our family. You are not just our employee. You are part of us. You have brought so much joy and love into our lives, and I want you to always feel at home here." As Helen read on, she felt the weight of the letter settle over her like a protective shield. Margaret had promised her that she would always have a place in this house, that she was valued and cherished. The tears that had been threatening to spill now flowed freely down her cheeks, each drop a release of the heartache she had been holding on to. In that moment, Helen knew she had to act. She couldn't let Andrew and Claire forget what truly mattered. The love that had built this home and the memories that were woven into its very walls. Margaret had believed in her, and now it was time for Helen to believe in herself and in the power of family. Helen's heart raced as she climbed the narrow staircase to the attic, each step echoing her growing anxiety. The house, once filled with laughter and warmth, now felt cold and unwelcoming to her. The arguments between Andrew and Claire had escalated in the last few days, leaving her feeling like an outsider in the only home she had known for half a century. As she reached the top, the dim light from a small window illuminated a dust-covered world of forgotten memories. The attic was a treasure trove of the past, filled with boxes and trunks, each promising a glimpse into the lives that had unfolded beneath this roof. Helen paused for a moment, her eyes scanning the room. The air was heavy with dust and nostalgia, and she could almost hear the echoes of Margaret's laughter as she helped her children play hide-and-seek among the boxes. Taking a deep breath, Helen began her search. She moved cautiously, her fingers brushing against the weathered surfaces of the boxes, each one labeled in Margaret's elegant handwriting. She opened a trunk, revealing a collection of faded photographs, each image telling a story. There was a picture of a young Andrew and Claire, their faces smeared with chocolate, grinning from ear to ear as they held a birthday cake. The sight brought a bittersweet smile to Helen's lips. But it quickly faded when she remembered the tension that now filled the house. "Why are you even up here?" she murmured to herself, shaking her head as she dug deeper into the trunk. "You should be down there, fighting for your place." As she rummaged through the box, she stumbled upon an old, ornate jewelry box. Its lid was slightly ajar, and she hesitated for a moment before opening it. Inside, she found a delicate silver bracelet, sparkling in the faint light. It had belonged to Margaret, who wore it every day, a reminder of her late husband. Helen gently picked it up, her fingers tracing the cool metal, lost in memories of the countless times Margaret had shared stories of her past while wearing that very bracelet. Suddenly, an idea sparked in her mind. What if she could find something in this attic that could help convince Andrew and Claire to keep her in their lives? She needed a sign, something to remind them of the love that had once filled this home. She turned back to the boxes, her determination growing with each passing moment. Digging through another box, Helen found an assortment of items: an old typewriter, a stack of worn books, and a collection of letters tied with a faded ribbon. Her heart quickened as she carefully untied the ribbon and opened the bundle. The letters were yellowed with age, but the handwriting was unmistakably Margaret's. "Dear Andrew, dear Claire," she read aloud softly, her voice trembling. "As I write this, I am filled with so much love for both of you. I want you to know that no matter where life takes you, this house will always be your home." Helen's eyes watered as she continued to read, her heart swelling with the memories of Margaret's unwavering support and affection. The letters spoke of family dinners, laughter, and the importance of sticking together through thick and thin. It was a beautiful reminder of the bond that had held the McAllister family together for so many years. But it was the last letter at the bottom of the pile that caught her breath. It was sealed with a wax stamp, and Helen felt a rush of adrenaline as she carefully broke the seal. She unfolded the letter, revealing Margaret's elegant script once more. "My dearest Helen," it began, and her heart skipped a beat. "If you are reading this, it means that I am no longer with you. I want you to know how profoundly grateful I am for your love and dedication to our family. You are not just our housekeeper, you are part of our family. I hope that you will always remember that this home is as much yours as it is ours." Tears streamed down Helen's cheeks as she absorbed each word. She had spent countless hours caring for the McAllisters, and Margaret's acknowledgement of her place in the family felt like a warm embrace, something she desperately needed in this moment of uncertainty. "Margaret, oh my dear Margaret," she whispered, holding the letter to her chest, "you always knew how to make me feel valued." With renewed determination, Helen set the letter aside and continued to search through the attic. She needed more than just these letters. She needed something that would bridge the chasm between Andrew and Claire. She rifled through boxes, her hands moving quickly, driven by a sense of urgency. Just as she was about to give up, she spotted a dusty old box hidden in the corner, nearly obscured by cobwebs. A sense of hope surged within her as she approached it. The box was small and ornate, adorned with intricate carvings. She knelt down and carefully opened it, revealing a collection of mementos, old postcards, dried flowers, and even a small, well-worn teddy bear that had belonged to Claire as a child. Helen picked up the teddy bear, its fur matted and worn, but still exuding a sense of comfort. She could picture little Claire carrying it around, seeking solace in its embrace during tough times. The sight brought a smile to her face, and she knew that this was the kind of memory that could help heal the rift between the siblings. "Maybe this is what they need," she said to herself, her voice barely above a whisper, a reminder of their childhood, of the love that bound them. With the bear cradled in her arms, Helen returned to the letter she had found earlier. She made her way downstairs, determined to confront the escalating tensions between Andrew and Claire. If she could invoke the spirit of family that Margaret had nurtured, perhaps she could save the home that had sheltered them all, even if it meant risking her own heart in the process. As she descended the staircase, Helen could hear the faint sounds of Andrew and Claire arguing in the distance. Her heart raced, but she clutched the treasures she had found tightly, resolved to remind them of what truly mattered. "Helen, Can you believe this? Andrew's voice cut through the air, sharp and filled with frustration. Claire wants to sell the house. She doesn't care about any of it. Andrew, it's not like that. Claire replied, her tone defensive. You're acting like I'm the villain here. We need to think practically. Helen paused at the bottom of the stairs, her heart aching as she listened to the familiar bickering. She took a deep breath, summoning the courage to intervene. Excuse me? She called out, her voice steady but filled with emotion. Both siblings turned to her, surprise etched on their faces. Helen, we were just... Andrew began, but Helen held up a hand to stop him. I know what you were discussing, and I think I might have something that could help, she said, her voice firm yet gentle. Please, just give me a moment. As she stepped into the living room, holding the teddy bear and the letters close to her heart, she felt the weight of the past pressing down on her. This was her chance to bring them back together, to remind them of the love that Margaret had instilled in their hearts. Do you remember this? She asked softly, holding up the teddy bear. Claire's eyes widened, and the tension in her shoulders eased slightly. Is that my old bear? She asked, stepping closer. Yes, Helen replied, a smile breaking through her anxiety. It was a constant companion for you, just like Margaret was always there for both of you. Andrew crossed his arms but looked curious. What's the point, Helen? The point is that this house, these memories, they're all a part of who you are, Helen continued, her voice rising with conviction. Margaret loved you both fiercely. She wanted this home to be a sanctuary for you, a place where you could always find comfort and unity, no matter what. She took a deep breath, her heart pounding as she revealed the letters. I found these in the attic. They're from Margaret. She spoke so beautifully about her love for you, her hopes for this family. Claire's eyes softened, and she reached for the stack of letters, her fingers trembling slightly as she touched the familiar handwriting. You kept these? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I kept everything that mattered, Helen replied, her heart swelling with pride. And I believe Margaret would want you to remember the love that filled this house, not just the property it stands on. As she spoke, Andrew shifted, his expression softening as he glanced at Claire and then back at Helen. What did she say? Helen smiled through her tears and began to read the letters aloud, each word echoing in the room as memories of laughter and love flooded back. With each sentence, she watched the walls that had built up between Andrew and Claire start to crumble, revealing the bond of family that had once flourished in their hearts. And in that moment, surrounded by the echoes of the past, Helen knew she had not only unearthed memories, but had also ignited a flicker of hope that could bring the McAllister family back together, one cherished memory at a time. As the sun began to rise, casting a soft golden light through the window, Helen sat on the edge of her bed, clutching the fragile letter she had just discovered. The ink was faded, but the words felt as fresh as the day they were written. With each line she read, she could hear Margaret's warm voice resonating in her mind, reminding her of the countless moments they had shared over the decades. Helen, my dear, she could almost hear Margaret say, her tone laced with affection. You have been more than just an employee to me. You have been family. The thought brought a swell of emotion to Helen's throat. Despite the turmoil that had erupted among the McAllister siblings, she now felt a renewed sense of purpose. This letter was not just a piece of paper, it was a lifeline. Determined to remind Andrew and Claire of the deep bond their mother had with her, Helen took a deep breath and prepared herself for the challenge ahead. She walked down the hallway, her heart racing as she approached the living room, where the siblings had been arguing fervently just the day before. Andrew, you can't just decide to sell the house. Claire's voice was sharp, filled with indignation. Helen paused at the doorway, her stomach tightening at the discord. It's not just a property, it's our childhood. Childhood? You mean the childhood we spent fighting over which room was bigger? Andrew shot back, his arms crossed defensively. This place is a money pit, Claire. We can't afford to keep it. We both know that. Helen swallowed hard, feeling the weight of their words. She had witnessed their mother's love for the house and the memories that filled its walls. She had been there for all the family gatherings, the laughter, and even the tears. If only they could see, she thought, how much this home truly means. With a deep breath to steady herself, she stepped into the living room. "Excuse me," she said softly, drawing the siblings' attention. They both stopped mid-argument, surprise flickering across their faces. "Helen," Claire said, her tone softening, "we didn't see you there." "I know this is a difficult time," Helen began, her voice steady but gentle. "But I think it's important to remember what this house represents, not just in terms of money, but in terms of family." Andrew rolled his eyes, but Helen pressed on. "Margaret loved this house. She poured her heart into it. Every corner holds a memory. Our memories. Before you make any decisions, I think we should all take a moment to reflect on that." Claire's expression shifted to one of contemplation, while Andrew remained guarded. "What are you suggesting, Helen?" he asked, skepticism dripping from his words. "I believe we should share stories," Helen proposed, her heart racing. "Let's take some time to remember the good times we had here. Perhaps it will help us see this place and each other in a different light." Andrew hesitated, glancing at Claire, who nodded slowly. "Fine," he relented, crossing his arms as if to shield himself from vulnerability. "But I don't see how nostalgia is going to change anything." Helen smiled, grateful for the small victory. "Just trust me," she said, her voice warm. "Let's sit at the dining table, and I'll start us off." As they gathered around the table, Helen felt a sense of calm wash over her. She carefully arranged a few old photographs she had found earlier that day in the attic, placing them in front of the siblings. "These were taken during the summer of '98, she said, picking up a picture of a younger Margaret, sun-kissed and laughing, surrounded by her children. "Do you remember that day?" Claire's eyes softened as she looked at the picture. "That was the day Mom taught us how to make her famous pie," she said, a hint of a smile breaking through her earlier tension. "I remember Andrew getting flour all over his face." "Yeah, and you were so mad because I accidentally dropped the rolling pin." Andrew chuckled, the corners of his mouth twitching upwards. "You thought I ruined everything." Helen leaned in, her heart swelling with the warmth of their memories. "But it turned out to be the best pie we ever made, didn't it? We all sat outside on the porch, laughing and eating until we couldn't move." "I can almost taste it," Claire mused, her voice tinged with nostalgia. "Mom was so proud of that pie." Encouraged by their engagement, Helen continued, "And what about the Christmases here? The tree was always bigger than we expected, and we'd end up fighting over who got to put the star on top. Mom always had to step in and settle the arguments," Andrew added, a hint of fondness lacing his words. "She was like the referee." "Yes," Helen said, her eyes shining. "She loved the chaos of it all. It brought her joy to see us together, even when we were bickering like siblings do." The conversation began to flow more freely, weaving through various memories of family vacations, birthday celebrations, and quiet evenings spent together. Helen could feel the atmosphere in the room shifting, the tension slowly dissipating. After a while, Helen decided it was time for the pivotal moment. With her heart racing, she reached for the letter she had tucked away in her pocket. "I have something I want to share with you both," she said, her voice steady. "This letter was written by Margaret. I found it in the attic, and I believe it holds the answer to our current situation." Andrew raised an eyebrow, skepticism flashing again, but Claire leaned in with curiosity. "What does it say?" she asked, her tone shifting from defensive to intrigued. Helen unfolded the letter, her hands trembling slightly. "It's a message of love and gratitude," she began, reading the words aloud. "My dear Helen, you have been more than just an employee to me. You have been family." As she continued to read, the room fell silent, the weight of Margaret's words enveloping them like a warm embrace. "I promise you that no matter what happens, you will always have a home here. This house is not just bricks and mortar. It is built on love, memories, and the bonds we share." Tears brimmed in Claire's eyes, and she reached for Andrew's hand, squeezing it tightly. Andrew's expression softened as well, his defenses slowly crumbling. "I had no idea," he whispered, his voice barely audible. After Helen finished reading, there was a moment of stillness. The siblings exchanged glances, the realization of their mother's love washing over them like a gentle tide. "She believed in you," Helen said, her voice thick with emotion, "and she believed in this family. It's not just about the house, it's about us. We can honor her legacy by coming together, just as she wanted. Andrew took a deep breath, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. I didn't realize how much I had lost sight of what really mattered, he admitted, his voice trembling. I was so focused on the money and the property that I forgot about the love that built this place. Claire nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. I've been so wrapped up in my own fears that I didn't see it either. We can't let our mother's memory fade away just because we're fighting over a house. Helen smiled, her heart swelling with hope. Together, we can turn this place into something that honors her. We can transform it into a home that reflects the love she instilled in all of us. As they sat around the table, the siblings began sharing more stories, laughter mingling with tears as they reminisced about their mother's warmth. Each memory they shared seemed to weave them closer together, erasing the rifts that had formed during their arguments. Helen watched the siblings, her heart full. This was the moment she had yearned for, the moment where love triumphed over discord. And as the sun streamed through the windows, illuminating the room with a golden glow, she knew that Margaret's spirit was smiling down upon them, proud of the family she had nurtured for so many years. Helen stood in the kitchen, the aroma of roasted chicken and fresh herbs wafting through the air, wrapping around her like a comforting embrace. She had spent the entire afternoon preparing the meal, channeling the love and care Margaret had always put into her cooking. The kitchen, with its warm wooden cabinets and sunlit windows, felt alive with memories. Each chop of the knife and stir of the pot was a tribute to the woman who had become not just her employer, but her friend, her family. As she set the table, placing the fine china that Margaret had saved for special occasions, Helen felt a mix of nerves and anticipation. She could hear the distant murmurs of Andrew and Claire in the living room, their voices rising and falling in an argument that had become all too familiar. The tension in the house was palpable, and Helen knew that dinner was more than just a meal. It was a chance to bridge the growing chasm between the siblings. "Dinner's almost ready," Helen called out, her voice warm and inviting, hoping to soothe the palpable tension that hung in the air. "Thanks, Helen. We'll be there in a minute," Andrew replied, though his tone lacked enthusiasm. A few moments later, the siblings entered the dining room, their expressions still clouded by the weight of their earlier argument. Andrew, tall and broad-shouldered, looked particularly tense, his jaw clenched as he took his seat. Claire, with her fiery red hair and fierce determination, seemed equally on edge, her eyes darting between her brother and Helen. "Wow, it smells amazing in here," Claire said, forcing a smile as she settled down at the table. "Did you make Margaret's chicken recipe?" Helen nodded, her heart swelling with pride. "I thought it might bring back some good memories," she replied softly, glancing at the empty chair that once held Margaret. She always said food has a way of bringing people together. Andrew sighed as he picked up his fork and poked at the food on his plate. "Yeah, well, I'm not sure it's going to fix anything," he muttered, his voice heavy with frustration. Helen felt a pang of sadness at his words. She understood the weight of their family's struggles, but she also believed in the power of connection, especially over a shared meal. "Sometimes we need to remember what we had, Andrew," she said gently, hoping to spark some warmth in the chilly atmosphere. "Maybe this will help us find common ground." Claire looked at Helen with a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. "You've always been the heart of this house, Helen," she said, her voice quieter now. "I just wish Andrew could see that." "I see it," Andrew replied defensively, his eyes narrowing. "But this house isn't just about memories, it's about the future too. We can't just cling to the past because it's comfortable." "Andrew, it's not just about comfort," Helen interjected, her voice firm yet compassionate. "It's about honoring the love that built this home. Margaret wouldn't want you to fight over her legacy." The siblings exchanged glances, and for a moment, the tension eased. Helen took a deep breath, sensing the opening she had been hoping for. "Why don't we share some stories?" she suggested, aiming to shift the focus away from conflict. "Let's remember the times that brought us joy." Andrew looked skeptical, but Claire nodded. "That might actually help," she said, her tone softening. "I remember the summer we spent at the lake. Do you, Andrew?" A reluctant smile broke through Andrew's stern expression. "Yeah, I do," he replied, his voice slightly lighter. "You almost drowned trying to impress that boy." Claire laughed, a genuine sound that filled the room. "I was not trying to impress him. I just wanted to show off my swimming skills," she countered, rolling her eyes playfully. Helen couldn't help but smile at the siblings as they began to reminisce. Their laughter filled the air, and she felt a flicker of hope igniting within her. This was the spirit of togetherness Margaret had always encouraged. As the siblings traded stories about their childhood, Helen listened intently, her heart swelling with love for them both. She remembered the first time she'd met Margaret and how the family had welcomed her into their lives. She recalled the laughter that echoed through the hallways, the family dinners that lasted for hours, and the holidays filled with warmth and love. "Remember the Christmas when we all tried to bake cookies?" Claire said, her eyes sparkling with nostalgia. "We ended up with a kitchen disaster and Mom had to rescue us." "Of course, and you two made such a mess that I thought she might never let you bake again," Andrew added, laughing at the memory. Helen seized the moment, her heart racing with inspiration. "You know," she began, "Margaret had this way of turning even the most chaotic moments into cherished memories. She always said that laughter is the best ingredient in any recipe." Andrew nodded, though his expression remained pensive. "Yeah, she had a gift for that. I just wish we could find a way to honor her without tearing each other apart in the process." "Maybe we can start right now," Helen suggested softly. "What if we made a pact to keep the memories alive, to celebrate the things she loved together?" Claire leaned forward, her eyes searching Helen's. "You mean like a family tradition? Something that keeps her spirit alive?" "Yes," Helen replied, her voice steady. "We can do it in a way that brings us closer, instead of pushing us apart. We can cook together, tell stories, and create new traditions in her honor." Andrew's brow furrowed as he considered her words. "But what about the house? We still have to figure that out." "The house is a part of her legacy, but it doesn't define us," Helen replied, her heart racing as she spoke from the depths of her experience. "We can make it a place of love and connection, a sanctuary for our family." The siblings fell silent, the weight of her words settling in the air like a thick fog. Helen felt a surge of determination. She could see the flicker of understanding in their eyes. "Let's eat," Helen said gently, breaking the silence. "We can continue this conversation over dinner." As they began to eat, the atmosphere shifted. The food, infused with love and memories, became a bridge between the siblings. They shared more stories, laughter spilling over the table like the wine in their glasses. Helen watched as the walls between Andrew and Claire began to crumble, the tension that had once gripped them slowly dissipating. "Do you remember the time we built that treehouse?" Andrew asked, a smile breaking across his face. "It was a disaster, but we thought we were architects." Claire laughed, shaking her head. "Yeah, and we almost got caught by Mom. She was so mad when she found out we had climbed up there." Helen smiled at their banter, her heart swelling with hope. If they could share these memories, perhaps they could also find a way to honor Margaret's legacy together. As dinner progressed, the siblings opened up more, revealing insecurities and fears that had long been buried. Each story they shared brought them closer, and Helen felt a warmth building in the room that hadn't been there before. "I always felt like I had to live up to Mom's expectations," Claire admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "I was terrified of disappointing her." Andrew nodded in agreement. "I felt that too. It's like we were always competing for her approval. I didn't realize how much it affected our relationship until now." Helen watched them, her heart aching for the pain they had carried. "You both have always been enough," she said gently. "Margaret loved you both fiercely. She would want you to support each other, not fight over her memory." Claire wiped a tear from her eye, and Andrew nodded slowly, contemplating her words. As the evening drew to a close, the tension that once filled the room had transformed into something beautiful. The siblings were no longer just fighting over a house, they were rediscovering the love that had always been at the heart of their family. "Thank you, Helen," Claire said, her voice sincere, "for bringing us together and reminding us of what truly matters." Andrew looked at her, his expression softening. Yeah, thank you. I didn't realize how much I needed this. Helen smiled, her heart full. This is just the beginning, she said, a sense of hope blooming within her. Together, we can honor Margaret and build a future that celebrates her love. And in that moment, surrounded by the warmth of shared memories and newfound understanding, Helen knew that they were on the right path. The journey ahead would be challenging, but they would face it together, united by the love that had always defined the McAllister family. As candles flickered softly on the dining table, casting warm, dancing shadows on the walls adorned with family portraits, the aroma of roast chicken and mashed potatoes filled the air, mingling with the scent of freshly baked apple pie that Helen had pulled from the oven just moments before. She stood by the counter, her heart racing as she adjusted the settings on the table, her mind racing with uncertainty. Tonight was her attempt to bridge the chasm that had opened between Andrew and Claire since their mother, Margaret, had passed. As she placed the last fork down, she heard the sound of the front door creaking open. The heavy footsteps of Andrew echoed in the hallway, followed by Claire's lighter tread. Helen's stomach tightened as she turned to face them, forcing a smile onto her lips. "Dinner is ready," she announced, her voice steady despite the tremor of anxiety that laced her heart. Claire entered first, her expression a mixture of exhaustion and irritation. "I can't believe we're doing this, Andrew. It feels pointless." She crossed her arms, her eyes scanning the room as if searching for something she could criticize. Andrew followed closely behind, a furrow deepening between his brows. "It's not pointless, Claire. If we don't talk about this, we'll never find a solution." He took a deep breath, his frustration evident. "We need to decide what to do with the house." Helen's heart sank at the mention of the house, their childhood home, now a battlefield of conflicting emotions. "I thought we could all use a nice meal together, just like we used to," she said gently, hoping to remind them of the warmth that once filled their home. Claire rolled her eyes, dropping her bag onto a chair. "It's just a house, Helen. It's not like we're going to go back to the way things were." "Maybe not," Helen replied softly, "but it's still special. This place holds so many memories." She gestured for them to sit down, her heart racing as she watched them reluctantly take their places at the table. As they began to eat, the atmosphere was thick with unspoken words. Helen served the chicken, her hands trembling slightly. "Margaret always said that family meals were important. They bring us together," she said, desperately trying to inject some warmth into the chilly air. Andrew glanced at her, his fork pausing midway to his mouth. "That's just it, Helen. Mom isn't here anymore. We can't pretend everything is okay." Helen's heart ached. "I'm not asking you to pretend. I just want us to remember her, to remember what she wanted for us." She took a deep breath, the weight of the situation pressing down on her. Claire's eyes glistened with unshed tears as she spoke, her voice softer. "I miss her too, but it feels like you're the only one who cares about keeping this place. Andrew wants to sell it, and I don't know what I want." "I don't want to sell it. I want to keep it in the family," Andrew interjected, his tone firm. "But we need to face the reality of our situation. Mom's gone, and we have to think practically." Helen felt a pang in her chest, but practicality doesn't always mean doing the right thing. This house is part of who you are. It's where you grew up, where you made memories with your mother. Selling it would mean losing a piece of that. Andrew shook his head, frustration spilling over. "Sentimentality doesn't pay the bills, Helen. What do you even know about our financial situation?" Helen's breath hitched, but she steadied herself. "I know that your mother loved this home. I know that she wanted you two to find a way to keep it together. That's why I'm here, to help remind you of that love." The room fell silent, the only sound the clinking of cutlery against plates. Helen took a deep breath, feeling the heaviness of the moment. She remembered the day Margaret had gathered them all around this very table, sharing stories of their grandparents, her laughter echoing in the walls. "Do you remember the summer we all spent here?" Helen asked, her voice softening as she leaned forward. "The time you two built that treehouse in the backyard? Margaret stayed up all night baking cookies so you could have a proper snack break." Andrew's features softened momentarily, and Claire smiled faintly, the memory stirring something within her. "We were so proud of that treehouse," Claire said, her voice barely above a whisper. Mom took so many pictures. And she always insisted on having a big family dinner to celebrate our accomplishments, Helen added, her heart swelling with nostalgia. This house was filled with laughter and love. Andrew leaned back in his chair, his eyes drifting to the window. But it's just a house now, Helen. It feels empty without her. Helen's heart raced as she sensed the shift in the conversation. Does it really feel empty, or is it just different? She hesitated, weighing her next words carefully. What if we could fill it with new memories? What if we honored her legacy instead of running from it? Claire looked at her, a flicker of hope in her eyes. Honoring her legacy how? Helen took a deep breath, her heart pounding. By coming together, by sharing stories, keeping traditions alive. Margaret wouldn't want you to fight over this place. She would want you to cherish it. Andrew's expression shifted, uncertainty clouding his features. I don't know, Helen. It just feels like we're holding on to something that isn't there anymore. Helen felt a surge of determination, but she is there. In every corner of this house, in every meal we make, in every story we tell. You have the power to decide what this house means to you. As the tension in the room thickened, Helen knew that she needed to push a little further. I found something today, she announced, her voice trembling with emotion. Something that might change everything. She reached for the box she had hidden away earlier, her heart racing as she retrieved the letter from Margaret. Andrew and Claire exchanged curious glances, the air heavy with anticipation. What is it? Andrew asked, his tone wary. Helen unfolded the delicate paper, her hands shaking slightly. It's a letter from Margaret. I found it in the attic, tucked away with some old photos. She cleared her throat, seeing the confusion in their eyes. I think it might help you understand what she wanted. With that, she began to read aloud, her voice trembling but resolute. My dear children. The words flowed from her lips, each syllable capturings of Margaret's love and wisdom. As she read, she could feel the warmth of Margaret's spirit enveloping the room, a tender embrace that seemed to transcend time. I want you to know that no matter what happens, this house is a place of love, laughter, and memories. It is a sanctuary that holds the essence of our family. Please never forget that it is not just a structure. It is a home filled with the stories of our lives. Tears welled in Helen's eyes as she continued, feeling the weight of Margaret's words. I hope you will always find a way to cherish what we've built together. The love we shared is what truly makes this house a home. Hold on to that, even when times are tough. As the last words hung in the air, Helen looked up to see Andrew and Claire, their faces illuminated by the flickering candlelight, caught in a moment of reflection. Mom wanted us to hold on to each other, Claire whispered, her voice thick with emotion. She believed in family above all else. Andrew nodded slowly, his gaze locked on the letter. I didn't realize. I thought she wanted us to be practical. I never considered that she might have wanted us to fight for our memories. Helen's heart swelled with hope, the atmosphere shifting as the siblings began to process their mother's wishes. This house is more than just property. It's a legacy, and that legacy is worth fighting for. In that moment, Helen knew that she had ignited a spark within them, a glimmer of understanding that could potentially heal the wounds of their fractured family. She felt a renewed sense of purpose, ready to guide them toward a future that honored Margaret's memory, a future filled with love and connection. Let's not just keep this house, Helen urged, her voice steady with conviction. Let's fill it with new memories, laughter, and love. Let's make it a place where we can come together, just like she always wanted. The atmosphere in the McAllister dining room was thick with unspoken words as Helen set the table, her hands trembling slightly as she placed the last fork down. The familiar scent of roasted chicken and mashed potatoes filled the air, evoking memories of family dinners long past. She looked around the room, a bittersweet smile creeping onto her face as her heart ached with nostalgia. This was the home she had dedicated her life to, a place where joy and sorrow intertwined within the walls. Andrew and Claire sat at opposite ends of the table, their earlier arguments still fresh in the air, charged with emotion. Despite the delicious meal before them, there was a palpable tension, like a storm brewing just beneath the surface. Helen could sense it, the weight of their unresolved issues hanging heavily over them. She took a deep breath, hoping that tonight would be different, that the warmth of the food and the memories of their mother would bridge the chasm that had formed between the siblings. "Would you two stop staring at each other like that?" Helen said with a gentle chuckle, trying to lighten the mood. "It's just dinner. You're not in a boxing ring." Andrew rolled his eyes, his frustration evident. "I just don't understand how Claire thinks we can just keep this house. It's a financial burden, Helen. We can't afford to keep it." Claire shot back, her voice rising. "You're being short-sighted, Andrew. This isn't just about money. It's about our family legacy. Mom loved this house, and we can't just sell it off to the highest bidder." Helen watched the exchange, her heart sinking. She had seen this coming, the rift growing wider with each passing day after Margaret's death. It was her worst fear. The family she had devoted herself to was on the brink of tearing apart. "Enough," Helen interjected, her voice firm yet filled with warmth. "This isn't what Margaret would have wanted. She valued this house, yes, but more than that, she valued the love that filled it." Andrew and Claire fell silent, their eyes darting toward Helen. The tension in the room seemed to dissipate momentarily as they absorbed her words. "Do you remember the Christmas we spent here, the one with the snowstorm?" Helen continued, her voice softening. "We were all stuck inside, and Margaret insisted we make gingerbread houses. We ended up with flour everywhere, and she laughed until she cried." Claire smiled faintly, the memory flickering like a candle in the dark. "And Dad got so mad because he slipped on the flour and almost fell into the tree." Andrew let out a reluctant chuckle. "Yeah, and then he tried to blame it on us. Mom just shook her head and told him to lighten up." "That's right," Helen said, her heart swelling with the warmth of those memories. "Those moments mattered, and they happened right here in this house. It's not just a structure. It's a part of who we are. It's where we grew up, where we learned to love, to forgive, and to cherish each other." The room fell quiet again, the siblings lost in thought. Helen could see the flicker of conflict in their eyes, but she also saw the glimmers of understanding beginning to break through. She knew that she had to go further, to tug at their heartstrings just a little more. "Margaret always believed in the power of love," Helen said, her voice trembling with emotion. "She taught me that family is everything. And even when things seem bleak, there's always a way back to each other if we just reach out." Andrew shifted in his seat, his expression softening. I'm scared, Helen. I don't want to lose everything. I don't want to fight with Claire, but it feels like we're on different sides." Claire nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I feel the same. This house represents so much to me, but I don't want to force you into keeping it, Andrew. I just wish we could see eye to eye." Helen seized the moment, her heart pounding in her chest. She needed to bring them together, to ignite the flame of their mother's love that had dimmed in the wake of loss. She stood up, her hands trembling, as she reached for the letter hidden in her apron pocket. It felt like a lifeline, a beacon of hope that could guide them out of the darkness. "Before we continue, I have something to share with you both," she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. "I found this letter from Margaret in the attic, and I think it's time we hear her words." Andrew and Claire exchanged puzzled looks, their curiosity piqued. "A letter?" Claire asked, her brow furrowing. "What does it say?" Helen took a deep breath, unfolding the delicate paper with care. "It's a letter addressed to me, but I believe it's meant for both of you too. It's about what this house means to us and the love that will always bind us together." As she began to read, her voice filled the room with warmth. "My dearest Helen, if you're reading this, it means I'm no longer with you. My heart aches at the thought of leaving you behind, but I want you to know how much you mean to me. You have been a part of this family since the day you walked through our door, and you have cared for us with a love that goes beyond words." Tears welled in Helen's eyes as she continued, the words wrapping around her like a comforting embrace. "This house is not just a building. It is a sanctuary built on love, laughter, and so many beautiful memories. I want you to promise me something. No matter what happens, you will always remember that our family is greater than any piece of property. It is the love we share that truly matters." The room was filled with a profound silence as Andrew and Claire listened, their expressions shifting from confusion to contemplation. Helen could see the emotions swirling within them, the walls they had built beginning to crack. "Love is what makes a house a home," Helen continued, her voice breaking slightly. "And I want you both to remember that it's not just about preserving this place, it's about preserving the legacy of love that your mother created. Please, don't let the burden of this house drive you apart. Fight for each other, just like Margaret would have wanted." As she finished reading, the silence settled like a tender blanket over the room. Andrew looked at Claire, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I never thought about it that way," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I've been so focused on the money that I forgot why this place matters." Claire nodded, her voice trembling. "Me too. I was so caught up in my own fears that I didn't see how much we both want the same thing: to honor Mom's memory and keep our family together." Helen watched as the siblings' expressions softened, the tension that had once filled the air now replaced by understanding. The warmth of Margaret's love enveloped them, and for the first time in a long while, she felt hope blooming in her chest. "Let's remember what Mom taught us," Andrew said softly, his voice steadying. "We're stronger together. I don't want to fight about the house anymore. I want us to find a way to honor her legacy." Claire smiled through her tears, reaching across the table to take her brother's hand. "Me too. Let's figure this out together." Helen felt her heart swell with joy as she watched the siblings reconnect, the shadows of resentment lifting like fog under the morning sun. This was what she had hoped for all along, a family united by love, ready to face the future together. In that moment, she knew that the spirit of Margaret would continue to live on, not just in the walls of the house, but in the hearts of her children, forever entwined in the beautiful tapestry of their shared memories. As emotions swirled in the air like the steam rising from the freshly brewed coffee that Helen had prepared, the atmosphere in the dining room was thick with a sense of resolution and tenderness that had been missing mere hours before. The once volatile siblings, Andrew and Claire, sat across from each other, their earlier animosity dissipated, now replaced by a shared understanding. Helen, seated at the head of the table, felt a warmth spreading in her chest as she took in the sight of the two of them. It was a rare moment of unity, a fleeting glimpse of what their family could be, and she was determined to nurture it. "Can you believe how far we've come just tonight?" Andrew said, breaking the comfortable silence that had settled like a soft blanket over them. He looked at Claire, his expression a mixture of relief and hope. "I mean, we started out ready to tear each other apart over this house." Claire nodded slowly, her eyes reflecting the candlelight flickering between them. "I think we both just needed to remember what it really meant to us," she replied, her voice soft but steady. "To remember Mom and how much she loved this place." Helen smiled at them, feeling a swell of pride. "Your mother's love was the foundation of this home," she said, her voice warm and inviting. "And it's important that we honor that love moving forward. This house isn't just bricks and mortar, it's filled with memories, laughter, and," she paused, her eyes glistening, "sacrifices." Andrew leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms thoughtfully. "I've been so focused on the money aspect, thinking about what this house could mean for my future," he admitted, his brow furrowing. "But I forgot that it's more than an investment. It's our family history." Claire reached across the table and placed her hand over her brother's. "And it's our legacy too. If we just sell it, we lose everything Mom worked for. The memories, the traditions." She trailed off, her eyes misty. "We'd lose Helen." Helen felt a rush of gratitude at Claire's words. "You both have been so wrapped up in your own lives that I think you forgot I'm part of this too," she said gently. "I've been here for 50 years, and I don't want to leave. I love this house as much as you do, if not more." "Of course, Helen," Andrew interjected, shaking his head. "We'd never want you to leave. You've always been more than just an employee to us." Helen's heart fluttered at that. She had spent decades in their service, but the love she felt for the McAllisters was undeniable. "Your mother made it clear to me that I belonged here," she said, her voice steady. "I want to help you both honor her memory in the best way possible." A contemplative silence fell over the room as they each processed Helen's words. The flickering candlelight danced across the walls, illuminating the photographs of happier times that adorned the shelves. Memories of Margaret filled the room, a comforting presence that wrapped around them like a warm embrace. "What do you think we should do then?" Claire asked, her voice breaking the silence. "I mean, how do we turn this house into something that carries on Mom's legacy?" Helen leaned forward, her hands clasped together on the table. "I've been thinking," she began, her mind racing with ideas. "What if we transform this place into a community hub, a center where people can gather, celebrate, and remember the values your mother instilled in us? Love, kindness, and family?" Andrew's eyes lit up at the suggestion. "That could be amazing. We could host events, classes, and even have a small garden for everyone to enjoy." He turned to Claire, excitement bubbling over. "Imagine the kids in the neighborhood playing here, learning from us about Mom's recipes, her traditions." Claire nodded vigorously, her passion igniting. "I love that idea. We could host family nights, movie screenings in the backyard, and even holiday celebrations. Mom always loved bringing people together." Helen couldn't help but smile, the warmth of their enthusiasm washing over her. "And we could include cooking classes, just like your mother used to do," she added. "I can teach the kids her famous recipes. There's so much we can do to keep her spirit alive." The siblings exchanged glances, and Helen could see the wheels turning in their minds. The tension that had filled the house just hours before was now replaced with a sense of purpose. They were not just fighting over a piece of property, they were rejuvenating a legacy. "Okay, so how do we get started?" Andrew asked, leaning forward. "We'll need to do some renovations to make it more accessible, maybe even a new coat of paint." "Yes, and we can reach out to our community to help," Claire suggested, her voice filled with determination. "We can organize a fundraiser to cover the costs. Mom would have loved that. People coming together to support something meaningful." Helen's heart swelled with pride as she listened to their plans take shape. "I can help with that too. I've always had a way with organizing events," she said, her eyes sparkling. "We can make flyers, reach out to local businesses for donations, and invite everyone to contribute." Andrew chuckled, a genuine smile spreading across his face. "I can't believe we're actually discussing this. It feels incredible to finally see eye to eye." Claire laughed lightly, her eyes sparkling. "It's about time we did something productive with our family home. Mom would be so proud of us." As they spoke, the atmosphere in the room transformed even further. It was as if Margaret's spirit had infused the air with a sense of hope and possibility. They were no longer just siblings divided by grief. They were partners in a mission to honor their mother's legacy, to turn the house into a living tribute to the love she had instilled in them. "I can't help but think about all the times we spent in this house," Helen said, her voice tinged with nostalgia. "The holidays, the birthdays, the laughter. Your mother always knew how to make every moment special." Claire nodded, her eyes glistening. "And she wanted us to carry that on. It was always about family for her." "Exactly," Andrew added. "Mom believed in bringing people together, and now we can do that. Let's make this house a sanctuary for everyone who needs it." With a newfound sense of direction, the three of them began brainstorming ideas, their excitement palpable. They discussed the renovations that would be needed, the events they could host, and the community members they could reach out to for support. The more they spoke, the more they realized how much they could achieve together. Hours passed as they plotted and planned, and soon the remnants of dinner were cleared away, replaced by a sense of renewed purpose. The laughter that had once echoed through the house returned, filling the empty spaces with warmth. As the evening wore on, Helen felt a shift within herself. No longer was she just the housekeeper who had dedicated her life to the McAllisters. She was now an integral part of this family, a matriarch in her own right. The realization brought tears to her eyes, but they were tears of joy. "Thank you, both of you," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "for including me in this. I've always believed that family is built on love, not just blood, and I want to help create a place where that love can grow." Andrew reached across the table and took her hand, squeezing it gently. "You've always been family to us, Helen. We wouldn't want to do this without you." Claire mirrored her brother's gesture, her grip firm and reassuring. "We're in this together. Let's make Mom proud and create something beautiful." As they sat together, hands intertwined, a powerful sense of unity enveloped them. It was a promise to each other, a commitment to honor Margaret's memory and create a legacy that would outlast them all. They were ready to breathe new life into the McAllister home, turning it into a vibrant space where love and community would flourish for generations to come. As vibrant hues of sunset spilled through the large windows of the McAllister home, casting a warm glow over the dining table where Helen sat, surrounded by the laughter and chatter of the grandchildren. The air was filled with the delectable aroma of apple pie baking in the oven, a recipe Helen had learned from Margaret long ago. The kitchen, once a place of solitude and anxiety for Helen, had transformed into a lively hub of activity, echoing with the sounds of joy and camaraderie. "Grandma Helen, can we help you with the pie?" piped up Lily, the youngest of Andrew's two children, with wide, hopeful eyes. "Of course, my little chef," Helen replied, her heart swelling with affection. "But you have to promise to be careful, okay?" "I promise," Lily exclaimed, her pigtails bouncing as she jumped off her chair, rushing to the counter, where Helen had already laid out the ingredients. Andrew and Claire observed the scene from the dining area, their expressions softened by the sight of their children. The siblings exchanged glances, a silent understanding passing between them. The familial bond they once feared was lost had begun to mend, and they were grateful for Helen's presence, which had acted as the glue for their fractured relationship. "Do you remember the time Mom tried to teach us how to bake?" Andrew asked, chuckling softly. "I think I might have burned the cookies that day." Claire laughed, shaking her head. "You always tried to sneak in extra chocolate chips. I remember her saying, 'Andrew, it's a cookie, not a cake.'" Helen turned, a smile playing on her lips as she chimed in, "And you both ended up with dough everywhere. I had to clean the kitchen for hours that day." The room filled with laughter, the tension that had once permeated their conversations fading into distant memory. Helen watched them, her heart full as she witnessed the rekindling of the sibling bond that Margaret had cherished so deeply. As the children giggled and mixed the pie filling, Helen took a moment to reflect on how much had changed. The house, once a battleground of conflicting emotions, was now infused with life and laughter, a testament to the resilience of love and family. Later that evening, after dinner, the family settled in the living room. The warmth of the fire crackled as the shadows danced along the walls, the ambiance cozy and inviting. Helen had suggested a family tradition that Margaret had started years ago, sharing stories, especially those that highlighted their mother's love and lessons. "Let's share our favorite memories of Mom," Helen proposed, looking around at the eager faces. "I think it's important we keep her spirit alive this way." Andrew nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I'll start. My favorite memory is when she took us camping for the first time. She was so excited, but then it rained the entire weekend. We spent the days inside the tent, playing cards and telling stories. I remember her laughter echoing against the rain. It was the best time." Claire smiled, her eyes glistening with nostalgia. "That trip felt like an adventure, even in the rain. Mom made the best of every situation. I remember her saying, 'It's not about where you are, but who you're with.'" Helen's heart ached at the mention of Margaret's wisdom, and she felt honored to be part of their memories. She had a way of turning the mundane into something magical, she added. There was the time she decided to turn a simple Sunday dinner into a themed feast. She dressed us all up in costumes and made the food match the theme. We were pirates that night. Lily's eyes grew wide with excitement. "Can we do that too, Grandma? I want to be a pirate." "Absolutely, dear. We'll have to plan a pirate feast soon," Helen promised, her heart warming at the thought. As the stories flowed, the children chimed in with their tales of family gatherings, each one more amusing and heartwarming than the last. The room was filled with laughter, a sweet reminder of the bonds that held them together. Hours passed, and as the fire began to die down, Andrew glanced at the clock. "Wow, it's late. I hate to cut this short, but we should probably get the kids to bed." "Wait," Claire exclaimed suddenly. "Let's take a family photo first. We need to capture this moment." Helen smiled at the suggestion. "That's a great idea, Claire. Let me grab my camera." While Helen retrieved her camera, Andrew and Claire arranged the children on the couch, their faces aglow with excitement. When Helen returned, she noticed the anticipation in the air. "Everyone say cheese," she called out, positioning the camera. "Cheese," they echoed in unison, their smiles wide and genuine. The shutter clicked, freezing the moment in time, a snapshot of joy, connection, and the warmth of family. As they gathered around to view the image on the camera screen, Claire's voice broke the momentary silence. "This is perfect. Mom would have loved this." "Let's print it out and hang it in the kitchen," Andrew suggested, glancing at Helen. "It'll be a great way to remember her every day." Helen's heart swelled with gratitude. "That sounds like a wonderful idea. I can make a whole gallery wall of our memories if you'd like." "Let's do it," Claire replied, her voice filled with enthusiasm. "We can include all the family events, not just the ones from our childhood." As the children yawned and snuggled closer to their parents, Helen felt a wave of contentment wash over her. The house, once filled with uncertainty, was now a sanctuary of love and shared memories. The next day, Helen woke up early, her mind buzzing with ideas for the gallery wall. She spent the morning gathering photos from various family albums, selecting moments that captured the essence of Margaret's love. There were pictures of family vacations, holiday gatherings, and even candid shots of laughter-filled moments. When Andrew and Claire arrived later that afternoon, she greeted them with a beaming smile. "I've been busy. Come and see what I've put together." As they entered the living room, their eyes widened at the sight of the makeshift gallery. "Wow, Helen, this is incredible," Andrew exclaimed, moving closer to examine the photos. "It really captures our family," Claire added, her voice thick with emotion. "Mom would be so proud." Helen's eyes sparkled with joy. "I thought it would be a great way to honor her and keep her memory alive in our hearts." "Let's add more photos over time," Andrew suggested. "We can keep documenting our lives together as a family." The children hurried over, mesmerized by the images displayed on the wall. "Look, Dad, that's you and Aunt Claire dressed as superheroes," Lily shouted, pointing at a photo. "Yeah, I can't believe we wore those costumes." Andrew laughed, shaking his head at the memory. Helen's heart swelled with happiness as she watched them interact, the love in the room palpable. The gallery was more than just a collection of pictures. It was a testament to the strength of their bonds and a celebration of the life they shared. That evening, as they gathered for dinner, the atmosphere was infused with warmth and connection. They shared stories around the table, laughter ringing through the air. Helen looked around, her heart full as she realized that Margaret's legacy of love was not just a memory, it was alive and thriving in this new chapter of their lives. "Let's make this a tradition," Claire suggested, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. "Every month we can pick a night to share stories, cook together, and remember Mom." "I love that idea," Andrew agreed, his voice filled with conviction. "It's the perfect way to keep her spirit alive." Helen smiled, her heart brimming with gratitude. "I'd love nothing more than to continue this tradition. Let's honor her together." As the family sat around the dinner table, sharing laughter and memories, Helen felt a sense of belonging wash over her. She was no longer just the employee, she was intertwined in the fabric of the McAllister family, a matriarch in her own right, carrying forward the legacy of love that Margaret had so beautifully instilled in each of them. As the sun dipped low in the sky, casting long shadows across the living room of the McAllister home, Andrew and Claire stood amidst the remnants of their childhood. The air was thick with the scent of fresh paint and sawdust as they tirelessly worked to restore the house their mother had cherished. Laughter echoed from the kitchen, where Helen was busy preparing her signature chicken pot pie, a recipe Margaret had shared with her decades ago. "Can you believe we're actually doing this?" Claire asked, wiping sweat from her brow. She brushed a stray hair behind her ear, her eyes scanning the sprawling living room filled with memories. Andrew nodded, a contemplative look on his face. "Yeah, it feels right. Mom would have loved to see us working together like this." As they continued to sort through piles of old furniture and boxes, Claire stumbled upon a dusty, ornate chest tucked away in the corner of the attic. The wood was aged and intricate carvings adorned its surface, hinting at its significance. "Hey, Andrew, come check this out," she called, her voice echoing through the dim space. Andrew wandered over, curiosity piqued. "What did you find?" Claire knelt beside the chest, her fingers tracing the carvings. "I don't know, but it looks old. Maybe it belonged to Mom or Grandma." With a nod of agreement, Andrew helped Claire lift the heavy lid. Dust clouds erupted into the air, and they both coughed as they peered inside. The chest was filled with a haphazard collection of papers, photographs, and small mementos, concert tickets, postcards, and a few faded family photos. "Wow, look at this," Claire exclaimed, pulling out a worn photograph of a younger Margaret with a radiant smile, holding a baby Andrew in her arms. "I can't believe how young she looks." Andrew chuckled softly. "And look at that hair. I think she wore that same style for decades." As they sifted through the contents, Claire's fingers brushed against something heavy at the bottom of the chest. She pulled out a thick envelope, yellowed with age. "What's this?" she wondered aloud, examining the handwriting on the front. "It's addressed to Helen." Andrew leaned in closer, his brows furrowing. "Open it." With a sense of reverence, Claire carefully tore the envelope open. Inside, she found a letter, elegantly penned in Margaret's familiar script. Her heart raced as she began to read it aloud. "Dear Helen," she started, her voice softening. "If you're reading this, it means I've moved on to another realm, but my love for you remains as strong as ever. You have been more than just a housekeeper to our family. You have been a confidant, a friend, and a vital part of our lives. I want you to know how grateful I am for the countless sacrifices you've made over the years. You have given so much of yourself to us, and I promise you, you will always have a place here." Tears welled in Claire's eyes as she continued, "This house is as much yours as it is ours. I hope you find comfort in knowing that you will always have a home with us, no matter where life takes you." Claire paused, overwhelmed by the unexpected depth of her mother's sentiments. "Wow, I had no idea," she murmured, her voice trembling. "Mom really loved her." Andrew felt a lump form in his throat. "I always thought of Helen as part of the family, but I never realized how much Mom valued her." Claire continued reading, her voice steady despite the emotion bubbling within her. "Should anything happen to me, I want you to take care of Helen. She deserves it. Please remember the love we have shared and let it guide you in your decisions. Families aren't just bound by blood, but by the love we cultivate over time." Andrew's heart sank as he processed the implications of the letter. If she meant that, then what are we doing, Claire? We're about to kick her out. Claire nodded, the weight of their earlier discussions pressing down on her. "We need to talk to her. We can't just ignore this." With newfound determination, they descended the stairs, the letter clutched tightly in Claire's hand. As they reached the kitchen, the warm aroma of pot pie enveloped them, and Helen hummed softly to herself as she stirred a pot on the stove. "Hey, Helen," Claire said, her voice trembling slightly. "Can we talk to you for a minute?" "Of course, dear," Helen replied, turning to face them with a warm smile. "Is everything all right?" Andrew exchanged a glance with Claire, gathering his courage. "We found something in the attic that you need to see." Helen's brow furrowed in curiosity as Claire stepped forward, holding the letter out to her. "It's from my mother." Confusion crossed Helen's face as she took the letter from Claire's hand. "From Margaret? What does it say?" As Helen read the letter, the atmosphere in the kitchen shifted. The clattering of utensils stopped, and all eyes were on her. The words danced off the page, and Helen's expression morphed from confusion to disbelief, and then to profound gratitude. "Oh, my dear Margaret," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. I never knew she felt this way." Claire stepped closer, her heart aching for the woman who had given so much to their family. "Helen, we had no idea either. We've been so caught up in our own conflicts that we forgot about what really matters." Andrew nodded in agreement. "This changes everything, doesn't it?" Helen's eyes glistened with tears as she looked up from the letter. "I just wanted to honor her memory and keep this house alive. I thought I was just a staff member, but Margaret saw me as family." Claire reached out, placing a reassuring hand on Helen's shoulder. "You are family, Helen. You've been there for us through everything. We can't imagine this place without you." Andrew stepped forward, his voice steady. "We have to honor Mom's wishes. We need to preserve this house not just for us, but for you too." Helen shook her head, a smile breaking through her tears. I can't take that from you. This house belongs to your family. I've always been just a caretaker. Claire took a deep breath, her resolve strengthening. No, Helen. This house is a testament to all the love and memories we've shared. And if we truly want to honor Mom, we'll do it together. The room fell silent, the weight of the moment settling around them. Helen's heart swelled with emotion, her mind racing with possibilities. You mean it? You want me to stay? Andrew nodded, his expression sincere. We want to keep moving forward as a family, and that includes you. With a renewed sense of purpose, they began to discuss how they could transform the house into a space that celebrated Margaret's memory. Ideas flowed freely, and laughter filled the air as they brainstormed ways to honor the woman who had brought them together. And deep within the folds of the letter, an unspoken bond formed. A promise that love would always prevail, binding them together through the trials and tribulations that lay ahead. As sunbeams streamed through the kitchen window, casting a warm glow over the remnants of the dinner that had brought the McAllister family together for the first time in years. The air was fragrant with the lingering scents of Margaret's beloved recipes, a testament to the love that had filled the house for decades. Helen, the faithful housekeeper, stood by the sink, washing the dishes while Andrew and Claire were seated at the dining table, their expressions a mix of uncertainty and hope. Are you sure we should tell her? Andrew asked hesitantly, glancing at his sister. His brow furrowed as he dried his hands on a dish towel, his mind racing with the implications of what they had discovered. Yes, we have to, Claire replied, her voice steady but soft. She deserves to know the truth. All these years, she's been more than just an employee to us. She's part of our family. Helen, overhearing their conversation, felt a flicker of anxiety in her chest. She had sensed a shift in the atmosphere since the dinner, a warmth, a connection, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something monumental was brewing beneath the surface. She turned off the water, placing the last dish on the drying rack, and wiped her hands on a towel. Is everything okay? She asked, her voice laced with concern as she approached the table. You both seem serious. Andrew exchanged a glance with Claire, who nodded, encouraging him to take the lead. Helen, he began, his voice slightly trembling, there's something we need to talk about, something important. Helen's heart raced as she pulled a chair closer, sitting down. What is it? You're scaring me. Claire took a deep breath, her eyes softening as she looked at Helen. When we were restoring the house, we found something, a document that belonged to our mother. A document, Helen echoed, her brow furrowing. What kind of document? Andrew leaned forward, his hands clasped tightly together. It was a will, Helen. A hidden will that, well, it changes everything. Helen felt her breath hitch in her throat. What do you mean? What does it say? Claire reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, her hands shaking slightly as she handed it to Helen. Read it. It's from Mom. Helen took the paper with trembling fingers, unfolding it slowly. As her eyes scanned the words, a wave of disbelief washed over her. To my dearest Helen, she read aloud, her voice barely above a whisper. If you're reading this, it means I am no longer with you. You have been my rock, my confidant, and my family. I want you to know that you are not just an employee in this house. You are an integral part of our lives. I bequeath this house to you, along with a portion of my estate, as a token of my gratitude and love. Tears welled in Helen's eyes as she struggled to comprehend the weight of the words. This can't be real, she stammered, looking up at Andrew and Claire with a mix of shock and confusion. Are you sure this is true? Andrew nodded, his voice firm. We double-checked the signatures and the dates. It's authentic, Helen. You're the rightful heir to this house. Helen's heart raced as she absorbed the information. But why didn't she ever tell me? I've spent my life here, serving your family. I never thought. Claire interrupted gently. Mom wanted to ensure you felt appreciated, Helen. She loved you like family. This was her way of honoring that love, even if it was unspoken. The revelation hit Helen like a tidal wave, the realization that she had been cherished and valued in a way she had never fully recognized. I don't know what to say, she murmured, tears streaming down her face. I always thought I was just the housekeeper. I never imagined I had a place in this family like this. Andrew reached across the table, placing his hand on hers. "You are family, Helen. We understand now that you've been a cornerstone of this home, a protector of our memories. It's time we acknowledge that." Claire wiped her own tears, her heart swelling with emotion. "We want you to stay, to be part of our lives, and to continue what Mom started. We can't imagine this house without you." Helen's heart swelled with a mixture of gratitude and love. "I've loved every moment I've spent here. You both are like my own children, and this house is as much mine as it is yours. But I don't want to cause any rifts between you. I can't take your inheritance away from you." Andrew shook his head. "This isn't about money or possessions, Helen. It's about love and memories. Mom wanted you to have this, and we want to honor her wishes. We want to build a future together in this house, not just as siblings, but as a family." A silence fell over the room as Helen absorbed their words, her heart racing with possibilities. "What if we turn this house into something that honors Margaret's legacy?" she suggested, her eyes sparkling with determination. "We can create a community space, a place where families gather, just like we did." Claire's face lit up with enthusiasm. "That's a wonderful idea. We could host community events, teach cooking classes, share her recipes. It would be a way to keep her spirit alive and connect with others." Andrew smiled, the tension in his shoulders easing. "I love it. It would be a fitting tribute to Mom, and a way for us to be together while helping others." Helen felt a sense of purpose wash over her. "Then let's make it happen, together." As they spoke, the tension that had once hung in the air began to dissipate, replaced by a renewed sense of hope and determination. The three of them began brainstorming ideas for the community space, their laughter echoing through the once quiet halls of the McAllister home. Days turned into weeks, and the renovations began in earnest. The house, once a battleground for Andrew and Claire's disputes, transformed into a vibrant hub of activity and love. Helen led the charge, her heart swelling with pride as she taught classes, shared stories, and honored Margaret's legacy through every dish she prepared. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden hue across the kitchen, the trio gathered for a celebratory dinner. The table was adorned with vibrant floral arrangements, and the mouth-watering aroma of Margaret's famous lasagna wafted through the air. "Here's to new beginnings," Claire toasted, raising her glass of sparkling cider, "to family, love, and honoring our mother's memory." Helen clinked her glass with theirs, her heart full. "And to the bonds that unite us, now and always." As Helen looked around the table at Andrew and Claire, she felt an overwhelming sense of belonging. They weren't just siblings anymore. They were a family, forged in love and resilience. And in that moment, she understood that the true legacy of Margaret McAllister was not the house they had inherited, but the love that now filled its walls. In the years to come, the McAllister house would flourish as a beacon of community, laughter, and connection, bringing together families and friends, honoring the spirit of the woman who had brought them all together. And at the heart of it all was Helen, who had emerged not only as the caretaker of their home, but as the matriarch of a new generation, carrying forward the legacy of love that would echo through time.